Okay. Welcome to the Discovering Leadership podcast. My name is Corbin Hannis. As usual, I'm joined by my co-host Carl Bowden. Carl, you want to tell us what we're talking about in this episode?
Yeah, we're going to be talking about goal setting. Specifically, how do we gather the right team? Now, before we go into the topic, the purpose of the Discovering Leadership podcast is to lead leaders. We want to build a community of leaders and really instill the foundational principles of leadership within our community. We want to help build relationships, help you craft your strategy, your business, your community, and your personal life. And then we ultimately want you to live to your most authentic self. Now, with our topic today on goal setting and gathering the right team, we're going to be talking about what are some attributes to look for in a team member. What do you do when you gather a diverse team? And what happens if you recruit maybe an unfit team member? What's the result of that? What's the consequence? And then what's the impact of gathering the right team? Now, today we're joined by Julia Fabris McBride. Julia is the Chief Leadership Development Officer at the Kansas Leadership Center and is certified coach. The programs Julia has developed at KLC have drawn people to Kansas from 5 continents. She is a co-author of Teaching Leadership and When Everyone Leads, coming from Bard Press in January 2023. Julia splits her time between Wichita and Matfield Green, Kansas. Welcome to the podcast, Julia.
Thank you so much, Carl. Great to be here, Corbin.
It's great to have you here, Julia. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing at the KLC and in business right now?
Yeah, I am, as Carl said, the Chief Leadership Development Officer at the Kansas Leadership Center. And what that means is I oversee the development of what we teach, how we teach, and I'm in charge of sustaining that great pipeline of an excellent, diverse, flexible teacher and coach team at KLC.
Awesome. So, when you bring different people to KLC, what are some of the types of people that you look for? Maybe in a coach, a teacher, a staff member? What are some of those attributes that you look
Yeah,
for?
uh, Carl, the first thing we're looking for is a heart for the mission. KLC's mission is to foster leadership and civic engagement for healthy, strong, prosperous communities. And that's in Kansas and beyond. And we need people who get that mission at the level of gut, heart, and mind. So that's the first thing we're looking for in a team member. And then there's other things.
Yeah, that's huge. That gut feeling, that passion, that
Mhm.
heart, that love for people
Yeah.
and to lead effectively.
Yeah. And we want them to be able to kind of envision a Kansas civic culture where people make more progress on the toughest challenges facing our companies, our communities, and our state and beyond.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So to me, it sounds like, say, somebody's past credentials, maybe their degree or their accomplishments are less important than who they are as a person and what they set out to do, their mentality, and how they can help bring value to KLC.
Exactly. So I mean, I think if I had to rank it, I think experience first, because otherwise,
Yeah.
like, what's on the resume or what I've heard about, or if it's a teacher or a coach, what I see at the front of the room. I mean, we actually audition people to teach for us. A couple of years ago, we had 70 people apply for 6 roles as part of our field team. And we auditioned every one of them because we didn't want to miss anybody. Because, first of all, we need them to submit a cover letter saying, yes, I'm interested in this.
Yeah.
And then I was looking at what they'd done But I also want before I decided you've done enough or you've done or you've done too little to be part of the KLC team or even to be considered, I wanted to see them at the front of the room and actually see how they engage with people, how they facilitate, and how they communicate big ideas.
Oh yeah.
Wow. So it's not really all about what's on paper, it's about who they are, how they hold themselves, how they lead others.
Yeah, really how they exercise leadership at the front of the room. And now this is in the case of somebody teaching. Now, if I'm hiring or being part of a hiring team for a manager or a director or somebody who's going to work a little bit behind the scenes at
Yep.
KLC, I mean, you're looking for different things, but I think first and foremost, the reason KLC has been so successful in keeping people, I mean, there's a lot of loyalty on our staff and on our teacher and coach teams. And I think that's because we start with mission when we're looking to hire and engage people on our team.
Yeah, you start with mission or the why, the
Mm-hmm.
purpose,
Exactly.
the reason for being, and that's contagious,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And when you can exemplify that passion, that purpose, that why, it gravitates people to the Kansas Leadership Center.
Yeah, and if you think about working in teams, that also becomes a common denominator. If we're struggling and the three of us don't, we're at odds because we can't find a way forward on whatever project we're working on, we can always go back to mission
Yep.
Mm,
and and then back to some other things related to purpose.
Oh yeah. It's like, um, to extend on your example, it's like if us three are working on a project and we get stuck at a point, we started with why. We're
mhm.
very intentional about talking about why we need to start with why. It's very important. And whenever you come to that roadblock, just circle back and look at why you started, the reason that you're there in the first place, and it can really help bring that momentum back to jump over that roadblock or move around it, whatever it might be. That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
I'm really curious. What are some of the qualities or attributes in a leader that they need to work as a team effectively, like integrity or maybe empathy, anything like that?
Yeah, that's really interesting, Carl. At at KLC, and I've been working with KLC since 2008
Yeah.
and full-time staff since 2010. So the KLC leadership framework is in my body and my mind.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that's where I start. And we start with five principles when we're talking about leadership. And that's leadership is an activity, not a position. Leadership is available to anyone, anytime, anywhere. It starts with you and must engage others. It's risky, and leadership is about our toughest challenges. So when we look for, when we hire or when we're putting together teams, we're asking who is willing to exercise some leadership. And that might look like asking a provocative question. So it's not unusual for a program associate in their early 20s to know that they're empowered and actually expected to ask a question that the more experienced members of the team, the CEO or the chief leadership development officer might not know the answer to and might not even want to consider in that moment. So we're looking for people who will ask those provocative questions. We're looking for people who have the will and the ability to look at multiple perspectives.
Oh yeah.
Mm,
So we talk about going up on the balcony. Are you able to get off the dance floor, go up on the balcony and look at a situation? And so not only see and talk about your own perspective right there in the middle of the dance floor,
Yeah.
but also be able to see the people who are leaving because they're unhappy, the people who are having a fight in the corner.
Yeah.
So to be able to like get on the balcony and look at a situation, and in the case of Kansas Leadership Center, sometimes we're talking about tough civic challenges or big issues in a company like
Yeah.
our engineering and management are not talking to each other,
Yeah.
or engineering management and manufacturing are at odds. We're hiring people who can help others see multiple perspectives, and they have to be able to, or at least be willing
Oh yeah.
to, to do that themselves.
That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like to me, so like with all of the different perspectives bringing in, it sounds like to me diversity is very important.
It is. It's really important.
Can you talk about how important it is to have diversity or to prioritize diversity when gathering a team?
Well, Carl, you talked about empathy.
Yeah.
And while that's not, we don't lead with characteristics like empathy,
Yeah.
you can't do what I'm talking about in terms of seeing multiple perspectives if you don't have empathy.
Yeah.
And nobody can empathize with everybody, right?
Yeah.
So
That
we
makes sense.
need people with diverse backgrounds, gender diversity, racial and ethnic diversity, political diversity, different ways of seeing the world, to be able to empathize with all the customers we're trying to reach, all the people, in our case of Kansas Leadership Center, that we're trying to mobilize to exercise more leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like what you said there. You know, we can't all be empathetic to people, but we have to have diverse teams with people that are already in diverse
Yes.
situations to really exemplify this other perspective.
Yeah, so that together,
Yeah.
hopefully, we're seeing, we've gone up to the balcony, all of us are up on the balcony, and we're able to see just like a much better picture and do better work
Oh
together.
Yeah.
yeah. So I've got another question for you. When talking about the diverse perspectives that you have to bring in, how much would you say that somebody's mindset is important to bringing in these perspectives? Say, if their perspective could be shifted, uh, or they could be non-empathetic to one type of person, but they come in and are on the team and they learn how to become empathetic to that type of person or group.
Oh, I mean, that's huge. Um, we need people on our teams who are, I mean, when I talk about what we're looking for in our teaching team, we're looking for, excellence at the front of the room, a diverse team, and everybody having the flexibility to learn and grow together. So yeah, you got to have an open mind,
Yeah.
because there's no sense having a diverse team if we're not listening to
Oh
each other,
yeah,
right? And
most
willing to
definitely.
be changed.
Yeah.
See, and that makes a lot of sense to me because you were talking about lack of communication being a sensitive area inside of certain organizations. Whenever, say, like the management team and the engineering team just aren't communicating or they're butting heads, they're
Mhm.
at odds. I can relate to that.
Can you?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
like whenever I was going to university at WSU, I had a class. I got my degree in entrepreneurship, and I had a capstone course, I believe it was, where we had to team up with an engineering team. They came up with a product idea, and I had to come in and make the business model around it, and then pitch the business model to a group of investors. Now, it wasn't always the easiest to communicate with a group of engineers when I
Mhm.
have a business background. I come to them and I'm like, "Hey, here's my idea. Here's how we're going to make some money." And they're like, yeah, well, I can't do this and that. It's like, I don't know how to build a product like that. I'm like, I'm not asking you to build a product. I'm asking you to help me with creating this, and that. And they're like, well, I don't know about that. What I was saying and what they were hearing were two completely different things.
Mm.
They had one mindset coming in from the background of an engineer, being
Mhm.
trained as an engineer, and I had a completely different mindset. So that was something that I needed to shift, which is what led me to asking you that question.
Yeah. So, in addition to empathy, if there's another kind of characteristic or attitude that is a prerequisite for good leadership or being a good member of a team, it's curiosity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So I need to be not only empathetic to the idea that you have feelings and I need to listen to your feelings, I need to be really curious about what's in your mind and what's on your heart.
that makes sense.
That's huge.
If we're gonna like really build something together.
Oh, yeah, being invested in the cause.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Curiosity is huge. And I think it goes back to asking those questions,
Yep, it does.
getting people engaged. Because when you ask those questions, then that person starts to go inside themselves. They start to find the potential within. And that's huge in leadership. It's really about helping others find themselves and become the best version of themselves.
And if you're curious and if you're listening to one another, then you're going to get ideas for experiments you can try. Like if you're working on a project, you're trying to move something forward. Say build your what was your project with the engineers?
So they came up with the idea to have a teddy bear or a toy that could help children with speech
Oh,
impediments in correcting some of their speech patterns.
yeah. So if you're open minded, flexible, really curious, and listening, you're going to come up with more ideas for that project, more experiments you can try. If you're working together, we would call it across factions. I mean, because in some of these cases, like the best teams represent different factions. They
Yeah.
represent like maybe different values, different things that they're loyal to, or different things they're curious about. And if when you bring those factions together, I mean, it's like 1 + 1 = 10.
Yeah, you're multiplying really from all these different perspectives coming
Yeah.
together, uniting, and creating positive change.
Yeah.
I really liked, I think it was your 5 values with KLC: activity, being available, starting with us, being risky, and then facing tough
Yeah,
challenges.
leadership is about our toughest challenges.
You know,
I mean, we might have
yeah,
a challenge of wanting to eliminate poverty in a rural Kansas county.
yeah,
Yeah.
That like leadership happens when we have something at the center and then different factions have different things that they can contribute to moving that forward.
you're helping others engage,
Mhm.
be
Yeah,
active.
yeah, yeah. So it starts with you, but it's got to engage others. So I bring my my perspective, and then hopefully I also engage other people who have the same perspective I do,
Yeah,
and you're engaging people who have the same perspective you do, and together we're getting curious and coming up with experiments that separately we would not be available to us.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, there has to be action. I don't know. I'm sure, Julia, you've thought about this, but I've always thought about the evolution of action or the evolution of leadership. So, where does it start? Kind of starts in our mind with a thought,
Yeah.
what we think about. And then what happens next? Maybe we speak it to someone or we write it down. It starts to become a little bit more real. But if there's no action that goes with our thoughts and our writings or our words, is it real? Is it actually making change? So that is a very critical component of leadership, and
Absolutely.
that is a very core value of the Kansas Leadership Center
Yeah.
is that activity, that action.
Exactly. So you have a challenge, and then you start maybe asking some questions of other people. You start looking at the challenge from multiple perspectives, and then you start experimenting. And that's where, for us, the action comes in. You're doing something to try to move that forward, even if it's just learning about it a little bit more.
Yeah. Now, when gathering the right team, you had mentioned that you're very kind of critical on who you bring on board to make sure they can engage the community. They can ask these difficult questions. And have people, take action towards their goals. How long does it take for, someone at the Kansas Leadership Center or just any other leader in business? How long does it take or should it take to hire someone?
Oh, that's a really good question. Um, yeah, what do you think about that? I guess I don't know. I mean, I can think of like we've hired people in 4 weeks, and we've had a long process where you're onboarding somebody and trying to for people at the front of the room to see, is this going to work? Where is this going to work? Where does this person fit? That can last 2 years.
Yeah. And that was one of the reasons why I asked it, because I think it does vary a lot
Mhm.
among different businesses,
Yeah.
different communities or positions.
Yeah. So we just hired 3 new members of our senior team, and we hired them fairly quickly, but they had been connected to KLC, um, one of them for more than a decade, the other two for 5 years or more. So back to what we talked about related to mission earlier, we knew, from the moment of posting the job description to this person sitting at the senior team was relatively short, 2 or 3 months, but there was years before that of getting to know those people in other contexts
Yeah.
and seeing them live and use the KLC competencies in other contexts.
Oh yeah, it sounds like there can be millions of factors at play and it's a multivariable equation. So
Mhm.
over time that the different variables start to come to light and that could be 4 weeks where you figure out, oh yeah, this is the right person for
Yeah.
this right position. It makes a lot of sense. It was an easy one.
Hmm.
Or say it could take a couple of years, maybe 2 years or even a decade where it's like all of these factors are coming to light and all these variables are we're finally figuring things out and
Yeah.
we found the solution to the equation
So I think
essentially.
that's one of the things we want. Uh, One of the things I would recommend is always be on the lookout for who you might want to have on your team 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I've got people literally on lists
Yeah.
Yeah.
who I'm gonna, I'm watching, I'm inviting them to be connected to KLC in different ways as learners, as volunteers, as like engaged in something civically. And in the back of my mind is the thought they could work for KLC someday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something I always think about too. And I know Corbin thinks about it as well. We're always thinking like, who do we hire next? Or who would be a good member for the team?
Mhm.
Do they have the right attributes, the qualities, the ability to ask those deep questions, so we're always thinking of that as well. But it starts with relationships.
Yeah.
Starts with the foundation of learning about each other.
Yeah, and that's where, back to your diversity question, Corbin, it's really incumbent on us as people who are hiring people to make sure that our relationships and our networks are wide
Yeah.
and varied.
Oh
Mm,
yeah. So something I'm curious about is say like the inverse of all of this. Maybe because nobody's perfect, no team is perfect.
Mhm.
Maybe some things don't come to light or some things don't add up in that multivariable equation and we add the wrong person to the
Mm.
team. What happens in that scenario? What does the leader do, or how does that affect the team when the wrong person is added on?
It can really drag a team down. It's hard because I think what happens is the team ends up attempting to work around that person, then finding that they can't, and then kind of retreating, and the work suffers because often rather than face the elephant in the room, which
yeah.
is
Yeah,
this team member where it's not working. So, as people in authority, people who many organizations would call leaders, but at the KLC, we make a distinction between positions of authority and the exercise of leadership. And there's a role for authority. So, as somebody who has some authority, who does hiring, who develops people, who needs to do the hard work of letting somebody go if that's necessary, you can't let there be elephants. I mean, you have to be constantly curious about the fit. And your first move is going to be, okay, look at this team, this person, it's not working on this team. If you still believe that this person has the commitment to the mission and the work you're doing, what might be a better fit? So that would always be my first move.
Yeah, it sounds like, if you have the wrong member on the team, there can be that communication disconnect
Mhm.
there. We kind of sometimes we have a tendency to avoid that member.
Right.
But what you're saying is we need to face it head on. Face the elephant in the room,
Yeah.
face conflict in a very clear, constructive
Yeah,
way.
and I mean, my first move would always be have a conversation with that person
Yeah.
and ask them what's going on, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you think this is working?
Yeah.
And they will tell you it's a 2. They will every time.
Yeah. And just
And because they don't want to feel that way.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
just being honest, on both sides of the communication streams,
Mhm.
for the person that might be the problem, but whoever's the person of authority,
Yeah.
they're being very honest with them and the
Mhm.
rest of the team as well.
And Carl, I might, like in that conversation, I might learn something about my own part of the mess
Yes,
too.
that's huge.
I mean, that's like,
It starts with us,
yep,
like what
yep,
you're
yep,
saying.
yep, yep.
That is huge. So, you know, what happens when we have the right team? We get everyone on board that we want, and they're just jiving together. They're building community together.
Mhm.
They're creating this activity. What's the effect on an organization or a community or an initiative with the right team?
They move that challenge forward. They make progress on that mission and they get in the productive zone of work. And that's the place where there's enough of a shared purpose and you've got the right people. They have the right information, they've figured out how to trust each other, and they've got processes in place that they're making progress on tough challenges, whether that's developing a teddy bear to help kids, or whether it's alleviating poverty in a rural Kansas county.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they move it forward.
They
And
move it forward.
the thing I've noticed about KLC is that you guys always say onward.
Yep, we do.
And that's exactly what it is
Yep.
moving forward,
Yes.
moving onward.
What's the next experiment? Yeah. Oh, this has been so great.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing I want to share with you is that Ed O'Malley, CEO of the Kansas Leadership Center, and myself have a new book coming out. It launches into the mail and into your hands on January 31st. It's called When Everyone Leads: How the Toughest Challenges Get Seen and Solved. And you can order it right now from any bookstore anywhere. It's published by Bard Press, and we're really excited about it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. Our next episode for the Discovering Leadership podcast is going to continue the goal setting series, and we're going to be talking about accountability. How do we hold ourselves accountable? How do we hold our team accountable? So remember, you can catch these episodes every other Tuesday, either on Spotify, Google, or Apple Podcasts.
Also, make sure you check out Enturian.com. That's Enturian.com. Take a look at exemplifyleadership.com as well. We're posting updates on the podcast and everything else with our businesses on all of our social media. If you'd like to see the video format of this podcast, make sure you head over to the Enturian YouTube channel. Again, that's Enturian.com. And as we wrap up, we hope you have a great rest of your day. But don't forget, alone we survive, but together we thrive. We'll see you on the next episode.